Okay, committee. Councilor Moore had to go home ill, so she couldn't make it today. That's why I'm chairing. So under changes to the agenda, we have a few. 7.6, we have replacement pages of 7.6108 and 7.6116 in your package. We also have the presentation from Antoinetta is in your package on item 6.2. And the minutes of the Brampton Heritage Board meeting 8.2 are there. And we have 4 delegations on item 7.1. The first one is Marcello Stellato, Vinod Mahesan, Jagmohan Thind, and Parminder Yashpal. And they will come after the delegation presentation. Okay, are there any other changes to the agenda? Councillor Spoglieri.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to add in regards to driveway widenings.
Okay, I'm assuming that would be 9.1. Madam Clerk?
That's correct.
Driveway widening,
Yes. 9.1?
9.1. Other business? Okay, that's what we would you move the agenda?
Yes.
Thank you. All in favor? That carries. Any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, Madam Clerk. Consent item, any items that anybody wants to put in consent or take away from consent? Councilor Bovee, are you still on from before?
No, I'm off.
You're off, okay. Councilor Bowman, do you move consent? Thank you. All in favor? That carries. And now we'll move right to our delegations in the first, and we'll bring each one of these 5.1, 6.1, and 6.2. We'll bring the items forward at the time we do the delegations. So the first delegation is David Riley from SGL Planning and Design on the Marysfield Neighborhood Character Review. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
I'm wondering if the presentation...
David, you may have to speak up a little bit.
Oh, sorry. Just looking for the presentation to be loaded.
They're trying to be up. You want to pull it? While we're waiting, Councillor Palesi just indicated he wanted to pull 7.4. So I'll ask for consideration, all council members, if we open that up and pull it. Is that okay? All in favor of doing that? Sorry, that loses. I'm kidding. We'll pull it at 7.4 is out.
Is the presentation going to be put up?
They're working on trying to get it over
Okay,
here.
perfect. Well, I can start. The first slide is pretty general anyway, so essentially I'm here today to explain to members of committee where we're at for the Marysfield study. This is a study that really came out of, here we go. Go back one slide here. Maybe I have to turn this on first. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, we got this now. Well, the outline of my presentation, I'll provide an overview of the study purpose, kind of an area context to familiarize everyone in the room with the Marysfield neighborhood. Through this presentation, I'll also be talking about a review of our character analysis of the Marysfield neighborhood, as well as preliminary recommendations from policy and zoning standpoint, and then discuss where we're at in the process and what the next steps are. Sensitive. Currently, there's an overall study happening for the Toronto Gore estate residential area in the city of Brampton. SGL, the company that I work for, was retained to work on this study on behalf of the city of Brampton. And there's really the overall study. There's really 2 components. components. There's looking at a character analysis of the existing estate residential community, and looking at how the community is changing and how we can identify those elements that really make up the character of the Toronto Gore area, and provide recommendations in terms of policy and zoning on how to protect that character going forward. There's also in the south, I'll go to the map to show this. This is the Toronto Gore community here. In the southeast quadrant of the community, there's an undeveloped portion of land, and part of the overall study looks at potentially introducing what would happen if we introduced more urban densities here. So a little bit higher density than you would see in the remaining estate residential area, given the development that's happening in the area, as well as provincial policy and the need to increase density, particularly in designated greenfield areas. But out of this study came a sub-study focused really on the Marysfield neighborhood. What's been happening within the Toronto Core area in recent years, there's been numerous requests there's always redevelopment of older homes and building larger homes. But in the overall area, there's been recent requests for severances, and about 3/4 of all of the requests have been happening in the Marysfield neighborhood. And the Marysfield neighborhood is just a very small component of the larger Toronto Gore area. It's located in the very northeast quadrant, on the east side of the Gore Road and south of Mayfield. So here's a map that's showing generally where the Marysfield neighborhood is. And so, kind of starting at a high level, when looking at this neighborhood, really the study was to focus on, kind of branching off from the Toronto Gore overall study, where do we go with Marysfield? This is an area that has a bit of a unique character, and I'll explain that a little bit more, in the broader estate residential area. And it seems to be an area that's generating a lot of requests for new development, particularly severances going forward. I'll get back to the specifics about Marysfield, but first of course, when looking at making any planning decisions or planning studies, it's important to start at provincial policy. Of course, the provincial policy statement is the guiding planning policy document in Ontario. Very high level, but does require municipalities to plan for a mix of uses and within residential areas, a mix of dwelling types. So you picture all of Brampton and all the residential areas. There is meant to be a mix of dwelling types, which includes estate residential areas, of course, but also much higher forms of density that you would see up to the high rises that are here and different kind of apartment neighborhoods around Brampton. The provincial policy statement also recognizes protection of cultural heritage resources, and I'll explain why that's relevant in a moment. Similarly, the growth plan is really meant to direct development to existing settlement areas and built-up areas. What it's really saying is that we're trying to make use of make efficient use of services and not keep expanding our settlement area boundaries. There's also direction in the growth plan to protect valuable heritage resources. And then getting into more specific about estate residential areas, you start seeing that policy come out in the Region Appeal Official Plan. The Region Appeal Official Plan recognizes estate residential areas, but really limits new estate residential development to areas that are already designated to permit estate residential development. So this would include the Marysfield neighborhood, the larger Toronto Gore area, as well as there's a couple other estate residential communities in Brampton. And also in Caledon as well, there's the Palgrave Estates area, which would be covered under the Region Appeal Official Plan. And then in the City of Brampton Official Plan, there are specific policies that apply to estate residential areas. So these policies set density requirements. So the minimum lot size, for instance, is 0.8 hectares or 2 acres. And it also sets out high-level criteria for development and severances in estate residential areas. So drilling down a little bit on Marysfield, as I mentioned, Marysfield is a unique area when you compare it to the remaining Toronto Gore Estate area, and I'll explain why that is. First, there's a bit of historical significance in the way that Marysfield was developed. So it dates back to 1954, where I believe it was one of the first housing co-ops in Ontario was formed. And what it was a group of people that belonged to a parish community of St. Patrick's were able to get together, form a housing co-op, and a housing co-op allowed them to bulk purchase materials to build houses. So people paid a certain amount of money for the plot of land, housing materials, and built their homes in this community. And as a testament to their faith, they designed the, and I'll go back to the image here. Oh, it's on the next page actually. The road pattern in Marysfield neighborhood was actually shaped as a rosary pattern as a testament to their Catholic faith community. Oh, now I'm back to this not working anymore.
You're trying to go back, I think.
Yeah, it's working now. Oh, it's going backwards. Now it's moving forwards.
Looks like we need new
Okay, I think it
batteries.
caught up with me a bit. One more. No. Seems to be switching back and forth. But I'll continue speaking as we try. The slide that I'm trying to get to, if someone could get me there, is the one that's Marysfield neighborhood character analysis. It's the first one there. Perfect. And maybe I'll just ask you to switch slides from now on, and I'll just put this down, because apparently I can't work it properly. So back to the characteristics that make Marysfield what it is. Similar character to the rest of the Toronto Gore actually is the mature tree canopy that you see here. And if you could switch to the next slide, there's actually quite a lot of landscaping, open space. This is an older, more established residential area, so you do see that more mature tree canopy. And those larger lots allow for much greater amount of vegetation. What's interesting is that there's a smaller average lot size in the Marysfield neighborhood when compared to the broader Toronto Gore residential community. The average lot size is 0.57. Many of them are actually at 0.4 or slightly less, which is just an acre and less, and some of them are a bit larger. You can see the rosary pattern there of the street, and there's a varied lot pattern. You see some lots that are more square in shape in the center, some that are narrower, which is partially as a result of previous severances that have been granted, and some that are longer that kind of extend to the edges of the neighborhood there. There's also, what's interesting driving through the neighborhood and walking around the street, there's an eclectic dwelling, siting, and design of the neighborhood. So what I mean by that is some homes are oriented, are situated in the center of the lot, some are off to one side, some are actually angled to present the front facade of the building to the corner of the building, around those corners of the street. And the front yard depth of these homes is actually much greater in many cases than what the minimum bylaw requires. So the minimum bylaw requirement is 12-meter front yard, whereas in many cases it exceeds 20 meters. And so this is something that goes into the character of the area, because you start seeing more landscaping at the front. The ground floor area of the home, so this is the building footprint, ranges from as small as approximately 70 square meters or 700 square feet to 700 square meters for some of the newer dwellings that have been built, which is a ground floor of about 7,500 square feet. So again, you start seeing that range of what's going on. Garage placement is also another attribute that really contributes to the streetscape. Whether the garage is situated at the front, at the side, or at the back, and is separate or attached garage. Again, there's a bit of a mix going on on in this neighborhood. And also dwelling separation distance. In many cases, about more than 50% of the dwellings have at least 40 meters on one side of their house to the next nearest dwelling. So that's quite a significant distance. So you can see a little bit of variation there. Next slide, please. I mentioned a little bit about severances that have been requested in this neighborhood. And there have been officially 3 approved and 3 refused. And you can see the colors on the map there that correspond to those. And I won't get too much into detail about this. Oh, and as I mentioned, 3/4 of the severance requests in Toronto Gore are happening in Marysfield. The interim control bylaw was brought in earlier this year, and this was really to protect, as kind of piggybacking on this study a little bit, really to protect the area as outlined in the staff report from further changes that may prematurely result in redevelopment that could negatively impact the existing Marysfield community. So essentially what the interim control bylaw does is, while this study is being completed, to kind of identify what those important elements of character are, there's a freeze on development, and that includes severances within the area, to kind of get to allow the city to get to the point where recommendations can be put forward, and those elements, those defining elements of community character, can be set in place in policy and zoning. Next slide, please. And so, as I've been explaining, there's a lot of elements that go into what defines the community character, and how do we kind of set that into motion? Well, you start at the official plan, and what's really been put forward in the initial study here are initial recommendations that are meant to be discussed and feedback received, and then eventually going to the public as well in September to garner more feedback, and our study will continue building. So it's good that there are some people here that are willing to express their opinions with respect to the initial recommendations here. So on the next slide, there's a summary of the policy recommendations. And again, these are initial recommendations that are meant for discussion, and for us to listen to any feedback. So the existing official plan, as I mentioned earlier, there's overarching policies for the estate residential area that call for the preservation and protection of unique and historic development patterns within the estate residential areas. There's also general severance policies that really say they don't restrict or promote severances, but what they say is that severances really should, when considering a severance, you should really think about the preservation of the rural-like character that exists within estate residential areas. And so what exists in some of the other estate residential areas are site-specific or area-specific policies. And one of the approaches that is recommended in the report is policy specific to the Marysfield neighborhood, recognizing that unique character. And it would address matters such as that criteria for compatible dwelling placement. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the character of the area hinges on where those dwellings are situated in relation to one another, in relation to the street, and kind of that relationship that exists there. So this criteria would include matters such as scale, height, massing, setback, building orientation, even separation distances. The other policy recommendation would be restrictions on severances where the proposed lot frontages are smaller than the overall predominant character of the area. So, making sure that there is that consistent streetscape kind of presence and lot frontages that exist on the street. There's also a recommendation for the future consideration of a heritage conservation district. And I just want to clarify that this doesn't recommend the area become a heritage conservation district. what it's saying is that in our review, we've noticed that there are elements that are unique to Marysfield that contribute to some of the characteristics that are exhibited in heritage conservation districts. And this is, you see the province's toolkit on analyzing and establishing heritage conservation districts. And certain elements such as street pattern, sense of open space in a community kind of feed into that. So one of the recommendations is a policy that directs the city to, in the future, prepare a study that examines whether a heritage conservation district might be appropriate for this area. And that study would happen after these initial policy and zoning recommendations. And maybe this works now? Nope. Next slide, please. And lastly, the zoning recommendations that were put forward are to address certain elements that define the community character of Marysfield and trying to maintain that level that exists today, and additional provisions for minimum lot frontage. So a way to do that would be to look at what the proposed lot frontages are for if there's a consent that's proposed, and in relation to, for example, the 6 nearest adjacent lots and where that fits in terms of generating what an appropriate number might be. Maximum lot coverage is another way another tool that can be used from the zoning perspective to look at preserving community character. For instance, you have here a neighborhood where there's a lot of smaller and larger homes. A way to do that would be that if there's an existing house on the property, a cap would be placed, for example, 20 to 30% of, you're allowed to go 20 to 30% over the existing lot coverage. And again, these are just initial recommendations for discussion. If the site is currently vacant, as there are a few vacant properties, it would be based on what is adjacent. There's also minimum dwelling separation distance. I mentioned that many of the dwellings are 40 meters away from the next nearest dwelling. This isn't a setback to the side lot line, it's to the actual building that is the nearest building. So one of the ways it goes into a bit of preserving that mature vegetation in the area is to ensure that there is enough open space, which is one of the predominant characteristics of Marysfield, on the street. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure that you have those consistent separation distances between dwellings. The siting of a dwelling on a lot. Some of the dwellings on the existing lots are pushed over to one side right now, whereas, and it makes it difficult for, if you're trying to preserve an open space setting, what happens on the next lot might be restricted by where that building is. So trying to center the buildings on a lot might be another zoning recommendation. And also front yard depth. One of the ways in my practice that I've seen has been fairly effective is to base the front yard on the adjacent properties. So if a simple example would be if one front yard depth is 14 meters and the next one is 16 meters, the minimum front yard depth would be 15 meters for the lot in between, so as to kind of keep that consistent streetscape in terms of dwelling placement. And lastly, minimum front yard landscaping is important. Because the open space and mature vegetation is such an important characteristic of Marysfield and also the larger Toronto Gore area, one of the recommendations is to ensure that a minimum percentage, for example, 80% of the front yard be maintained as landscaping. And this would ensure that it's not dominated by a driveway or parking areas. Because these are lots that are slightly larger, those areas can be consolidated in other parts of the property that may not have as much of an impact on the streetscape and those character-defining elements of Marysfield. Following slide, please. And so where we're at now, as outlined in the recommendation report, is we'd like to go to public consultation in September to get that important feedback that we need from the community, particularly the residents of Marysfield. We haven't had that opportunity to discuss with them at this point, so their feedback is really essential to the success of what is implemented in the study. Following that, specific policy and zoning recommendations will be developed and a final report generated in the fall. Depending on when things place, the interim control bylaw, I believe, runs on, I believe it's February 2019. And until the statutory public meeting and council approves recommendations, there may be a need to extend the interim control bylaw. But I can't really say any more than that. But ultimately, the goal is to, in the second quarter of 2019, be back to council with recommendations for Marysfield neighborhood. And that is my presentation.
Thank you. What I'm going to ask is that we hold any questions the council members might have until after we hear from the delegations. Before we go to delegations, I'm going to ask the commissioner to explain the status of this process and where we are, because I'm assuming, Mr. Commissioner, because we're going to a public consultation, that any comments that are made tonight by these residents can be used as that public consultation and be captured in the minutes. So they would be.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we will take any feedback we hear today as public feedback on this process. We've just heard about the process that's unfolding in front of us. So there'll be a formal process of public consultation in the fall, but absolutely we will capture feedback we hear today. And as always, happy to meet with landowners at any time that's convenient for them as well.
Good. So I hope the delegates understand that there's going to be plenty of time after today too to also have some more feedback in the process. So I'll ask that Marcelo Stellato and Mary Stellato are first.
No. Okay, I'm Marcello. My daughter's married. She's not here, so
Okay, welcome.
thank you. The reason I'm going to answer some questions that he put up, like the reason all the houses are on one side of the property, not in the middle, is because the original plan had all those lots already split up into 2 parcels, 3 parcels from the original plan, not just what you see in front of you. I don't have anything to show you up there, but, you know, and then the other thing is that he was saying the trees. There is no canopy. The only canopy that's around is the boundaries between the properties. There's very few trees in the middle of all those properties that he's talking about. You got the St. Patrick's Park, which is in the back, which has all trees, tree-lined in that area. And the frontages, like he was saying, there is one house that got split. The lot was split because I live there. I've been there since 1988. So the first lot that split was beside me, which is 58 Marysfield. That split about 10 years ago into 2, and the guy's building now on it. And the owner sold it, and that's why that other guy's built. That house is being built right now. The second lot that split was the corner lot, which I'm not sure what it is, but the frontage on the back side of that lot, that was a 3-acre lot, is only 60 feet. Because he took the front half of the property, severed that off, and now he's living in the back side, which his house is already built there. But it's only a 60-foot frontage to his house, not 100, not whatever. Okay, so, and let's see, what else did I have here? And I'm here because I wanted to split 28 Marysfield. It was where my daughter lives, because I wanted to split that in half. That's got a 268-foot frontage, and I wanted to build my house over there. And that's why I'm here. Okay. And backing on to Marysfield is going to be a subdivision. Right now, on the other side of Gore Road, there's a subdivision behind the school. And Gold Park Homes owns behind Marysfield. And behind Marysfield, it's all going to be subdivision. So I don't understand why this particular area has been picked, just the street, for, you know, whatever you guys are planning to do with it. Everybody's, if you haven't had no consensus of anybody on the street, you know, coming here and saying, like, you know, anybody going around or saying, what do you want to do with this area? We're the only ones that are doing anything because we're the ones that wanted to split or sever a piece of property. And that's why we're here. Basically, that's it. I had some stuff, but, and some pictures. Oh, yeah, that's right. There's 6 houses currently on that street that are being rented that are going to be demolished eventually, and something's going to be built on it. Out of those 6 houses, 2 are not livable. Their basements were flooded. They've got mold, they've got everything, so they can't live on it. One of them is one of the people that is also applying for severance. That's why they didn't maintain the property. Now it's not livable in that property. There's, in front of me, where I am, there's 2 houses that are being rented. Those are actually, one guy right now has got all the stakes out for, to tear down the place and build something, but he has a smaller lot, so he has to tear down the house to build. The other ones, everybody else's address, everybody else is to the side. Like I said, when this original plan came out in the 54, it had 2 lots per right now, like there's like 62, it's 60, 58, 56. 56, 58 is the same lot. That, right now it's already severed. 60 and 62, that is 62. You can't sever that one, but it had 2 lots on it. Everybody else had 2 to 3 lots on that property on the original plan. And that's why everything is to one side. Because they're all built on one side thinking they're going to sever the other side. Okay, that's it.
If you have anything else, there's plenty of time. You can submit to the planning department or
Okay.
come back later. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I should have mentioned we do a 5-minute rule for time. You didn't go over, so,
Oh.
but I should have mentioned that at the beginning. Thank you. Okay, the next delegation is Vinod Mason. Welcome.
Thank you. I do have a presentation. Is somebody going to show that, or?
Did you submit it to the clerk's department?
I had submitted to the city, yeah. And email it. There you go.
There you
That's
go.
right. That's nice. Can you go to the next slide, please? So yeah, as I said, I'm the owner of 41 Marysville Drive, and my brother is the owner for 20 Marysville Drive. Which actually, it's now 3 St. Patrick's Road, because the city decided to change the name. So I have got 5 minutes. I'm going to try to be brief and short here. One of the things, I'm going to go after the 3 components which has been asked for. One is the direction to extend the interim bylaw. The interim bylaw is draconian in nature, with complete restriction in usage of one's own property. We are creating scenarios for our families to reside in derelict and dangerous properties without any recourse to improve the situation. So when we say we are going to do a character study, the important thing is that's not the space and the location and the street. It's the people also who are living there. So that has to be done. The original request for a character study was around 12 years ago when the first severance went through. OMB asked for the city to do it. City didn't do it. The second time was in 2011 when the second severance went through. The planning committee asked the city to do the study. They didn't do it. They waited till 2018 to do that. Right? The markets has changed. Scenarios have changed. You cannot just simply come in after so many years and do it. And then again, I'm very supportive of it. We said, okay, it's a good idea. Do it. Started in February 2018, and now we are coming all the way till January 2019. You see, in 1 year, you can't do the whole study. You need 2 years to do the study. That's ridiculous, right? Everywhere else, the prices, you're putting subdivisions across our places. We can't do anything with our own property. I have to put my family in that home. Not possible, not acceptable. So the recommendation to extend the bylaw should not be considered, and the staff and the planners be directed to complete the study within the reasonable window of the bylaw. You have 1 year, you could do it in 1 year, right? If not, let's find somebody else who can do it. Second is the consideration for Heritage Conservation District. The pattern and the character elements which have been explained do not really apply to Marysville area, with certain residents enjoying the benefits of larger cluster homes, while others going to be penalized. The city is planning for a significant dense development abutting Marysville area as part of the block plan area 47-2, and this is as part of your own committee agenda of June 6, 2017. Gold Park coming up with close to 2,300 plus homes out there. So with that will change the character of the area itself. Thirdly, something which has not been even shown in the review is that there are 2 new huge mansions and potentially larger homes which are coming in the review, which was not used in the character assessment. I do have them in the next out there. The cottage-style homes, which have been explained out in the review, are mostly rundown shacks, which cannot be compared with the neighboring and newer homes. Finally, the rosary pattern of the street, while it's unique, can be preserved without having to really impact the nature of the neighborhood, right? That's a one single entry road out there. The eclectic mix of homes, which is giving way to market housing demands with newer, bigger, better, and sustainable homes coming up, has already changed the character. It's modern looking, better homes which have come up now there. So let's not go backwards. And finally, one of the things was the idea about that, there are ditches on both sides of the road and there are no walkways. You should come into the neighborhood. Every household has small little kids. In fact, my own car this winter went into one of the ditch very close to being a flip over. Right? So I'm not sure what we're trying to do, achieve. We are like, let's retain the ditches, and when the kids can run around, they can go into the snow, cars can slip down. And a lot of the homes, as one of my previous neighbor had said, is renters, with the owners being non-residents of the province who have no interest out there. The third point, I know I'm literally running out of time, but please bear with me. The maximum lot coverage, which has been set out as to be part of existing footprint, and this directly affects me. That's why I'm very clearly articulating it, right? On my lot, even though it's sitting on close to a 2-acre lot, it's a small home. It's hardly 700 square foot. Now, if you say that I can only build a little bit bigger than that, that means the max I can build is 2,000 square foot, even if I put 2 stories on it. While my neighbor, who sits on 1-acre lot, whose existing home, which is a rundown home, is sitting on close to 3,000 square foot, he can easily build a 6,000 square foot home. So I'm trying to understand is that what kind of study is being done and what kind of recommendations are going out. Right? You spend 6 months studying the place. You do not do a detailed study of this. I came out from all of this just by living there and just pulling up some things from now there. Can we go to the next slide, please? I just wanted to show some things. So that's the block plan area. That's
I'm
what.
going to have to ask you to summarize. Your time is up.
Okay, so summarize the summary which I'm asking for is, please do not penalize us. If you want to build homes for our families, please allow us to do that. We are okay with the city performing the study. Please do it in the due time frame. Do not extend the interim bylaw. As far as the study is considered, heritage conservation district, that's fine. I'm saying retain the character, but at the same time, do not penalize me from financially that tomorrow none of the homes are saleable out there. That's the only humble request. Rest all, I'll leave it up to the honorable council to decide and work on.
And like I say, there's still plenty of time to have more input in the process if you'd like to. So.
Understood, but with the timings which have been explained, it's becoming, that's not tenable.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The next delegation is Bagmahan Singh. Is he here? Yep.
Hi everyone. My name is Jagmohan Singh, the owner of the 20 Marysfield land. We bought this land a couple of years ago to build our dream house. And this is the same plot which was severed to 22 Marysfield. And our neighbor is building up over 8,000 square feet house on that land. On the other side of the house, there's already newly built 2-story home. So that means my house is not impact for anyone. I am right in the middle. The home on the plot now is not livable for us. I'm under a lot of burden. I have to pay 2 mortgages. My plan was to make our house and sell the one I live in. I can't do this because of this study. There are already few houses under the construction. It is not fair to us not to allow to construct our home. We understand there is a character review study. We should get the exception to build our home, since it not impact to anyone else, because both sides having a big homes, and other homes in the neighbor are already under construction. I have a couple pictures if you want to review it.
And in addition to that, I'm his daughter, Jasmine, and talking about the historical preservation, I understand that we want to preserve historical preservation, but 20 Marysfield and the Marysfield neighborhood is already a place that has homes in it, and with developing new homes in the place, we're preventing urban sprawl, which would mean that we destruct further land, and with more historical preservations. And if we develop on the land that has homes that are already developed, we just need to renovate them, make them bigger, and make them a livable place for us and our families. I don't think there's any problem with that because we're preventing urban sprawl, and urban sprawl is not good for Canada or for anyone in that instance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next delegation is Parminder Yashpal. Welcome.
Honorable Council and all present, my name is Parminder Yashpal. I'm a resident of 23 Marysfield Drive. I've lived at this address for about 13 years. Bought it back in the day because my kids were young, and bought it with a dream that one day maybe they will grow older and I'll be able to make a bigger house and probably even have grandchildren there. They'll get married there and have grandchildren. So now I came to a point where I could realize this dream, and I was in the process of actually making drawings for the house. When I found out that they've started this study and I cannot develop my property anymore. I think that is very unfair with a lot of houses on the street that are already newer built houses, and I don't know why I shouldn't be able to build a house on there. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, so that concludes your delegation. Our first speaker is Councillor Spoglieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that we've heard from some of the public already, but we'll be listening for the rest. Just for a bit of background information, it is an old community, and most of the homes that were built here back in the day, they're mostly frame homes, siding, and very affordable, small homes that were built, and I believe that most of them have had their lifespan is pretty well. Some have been well kept, I must say, but the vast majority of the original homes, I think their lifespan has pretty well run out. So I believe as part of this exercise, we should do an assessment of actually on the state of the homes. It's, the original homes, that is. Some of the newer homes are, of course, they've been well built and they have a long lifespan, but some of the original homes, I think, need to be assessed and see if they're worthy of preservation or not, because knowing the area, I think a lot of them are pretty well had their day. The other issue that we need to also consider in the study is, I personally feel that allowing bigger homes on these lots is good use of land, especially since there is a transition happening in this small community, and it's been happening for a number of years. I think that the issue has to really be looked at is there's no sanitary sewers in this community, in this neighborhood, and we need to assess how big a home could be, or how many bedrooms before, and to what extent before this area becomes, it may become problematic from a septic point of view. So I think that has to be looked at, is how much impact can this area handle with bigger homes, more washrooms, more bedrooms. The wells are gone, mostly it's all on town water, city water, or regional water. So the water is being used plentifully. So that, I think that has to be addressed. And from my perspective, there's still a few lots that could be divided based on past divisions. But I believe we need to come up with a formula where you have to have a certain amount of, I know some of these are square lots, some are long, narrow. But in the final end, I believe that we have to come with a common denominator, the size of lot, that has to be maintained, that has been established. The majority of the lots, as you see, are the smaller square lots, and perhaps this is the gross area that we should let this be the guiding principle of this, what size of lots this area should be ultimately be allowing based on the what's established already. So these are the things I believe we should be looking at, and as I said before, I do believe that some of the old frame homes have had their day, and allowing people to build new homes on those lots makes good sense. The question is how big, how much can the area, unless there's plans to bring in sewer when the subdivision to the east comes about. If there's, then possibly the homes could be larger than, so the impact, the sewage impact has to be looked at. I think it's going to be very important for the safety of the residents themselves. We don't want the area overburdened, the ground. I think it's clay, and to what amount of absorption will be allowed, and except for, I know that there's some new technology in septic systems that possibly can allow some greater intensities, but that's got to be looked at, I think, in this study. I think it's the important factor to look at, just for the benefit and safety of the residents who are going to be living here in the future. So, Mr. Chairman, I support the study, and I think there's a need to do this study because we could end up having more people coming along wanting to divide their these square lots, and so we need some guidance on exactly what should be allowed to keep the harmony in the community, so that obviously everybody wants to take advantage of the of the property that's there. It's a nice community. It's been there a long time, and it should be maintained to some respect. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll move the report.
Okay.
Yes.
Councillor Dillon?
Can you give me on the board? There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question. Were there any applications that were outstanding or active during the time that this interim bylaw was brought forth?
Through the chair, perhaps I can actually ask the planner on the file to give you some specific numbers if they're handy. The short answer, there are some applications that are in process at this point in time. I haven't got the specific number at my fingertips, though.
So those are all put on hold for now.
That's correct.
What was the, aside from what was here, is there any other justification that was given to those applicants?
Through the chair, the justification is that obviously we want to make sure that we have an understanding of what's an appropriate form of development moving forward in the neighborhood. So really having time to undertake a study which would look at all aspects and bring forward a recommendation for this council's consideration is the rationale behind this.
Thanks.
Okay. So the report is 7.1 is moved by Councillor Povieri. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. We'll move on to, next item is 6.1, presentation by Daniela Balasel, policy planner. And we'll bring forward 7.2 at that time. Sorry, thank you. We'll take a motion to receive the 4 delegations too. Councilor Bowman, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Okay? Sorry. Are we waiting for presentation? Looks like we're having some audio problems tonight. musical interlude while we're waiting. How long is it going to be until we're back in the chambers?
Should I proceed? Okay, here we go. Okay, just go back a few slides. Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of Planning Committee, Madam Mayor. My name is Daniela Balasal. I'm a planner in the Planning and Development Services Group. First, before I begin the presentation, I wanted to acknowledge the contributions of our economic development staff. They assisted with preparing the various figures contained within our needs assessment report. And as well, we did obtain information from Peel Region, so I wanted to thank them for their support. This has been a very collaborative effort, and we do have staff from the region of Peel in attendance to answer any questions. So I believe Brian Krebs as well as Chun Yam are in the audience today. Thank you. Okay. So the housing needs assessment, it provides an overview of the core housing needs in Brampton. So as the city moves forward with its affordable housing strategy, it's important to assess the state of housing in Brampton. This allows for informed decision-making, and it also allows for strong policy formulation as well. It serves as an early deliverable of our affordable housing strategy, Housing Brampton, and it is also based on information that we have obtained from it represents various demographic information that we've obtained from Statistics Canada, as well as CMHC and the city's building department. I think we first need to begin by looking at the various roles of government in providing affordable housing. So the city primarily focuses on planning matters, land use matters, whereas the region of Peel, they are the housing service manager, and they are responsible for the delivery of affordable housing, as well as maintaining the centralized wait list. So currently, the wait list stands at 6.5 years. So that means it takes someone, on average, 6.5 years to obtain suitable forms of housing, suitable forms of affordable housing from the region of Peel. So we are looking at collectively improving that. When you look at the current stock of housing in Brampton, the city has 172 shelter beds, as well as 3,400 social housing units located within the city itself. And in terms of some of the emerging priorities contained within the region of Peel's work, they are looking at increasing the number of shelter beds. So I understand they're looking at developing permanent shelter or permanent forms of housing for local youth. So we will continue to monitor those efforts as well. Okay. So under the city's purview, some of the tools and incentives that we look at to support the creation of affordable housing include things such as density bonusing, pre-zoning, inclusionary zoning, to name a few. Also, the city recently received funding, an allocation of $5 million over the next 5 years from the province of Ontario. This serves under their development allocation, their DC rebate program, development charges rebate program. We are working with the region to implement this new program, and it is expected that a city staff report will be brought forward to council sometime in July. So Brampton's findings within our needs assessment is very consistent with what was contained within Peel Region's recent needs assessment report. So such things as funding was identified as being important, funding for affordable housing, as well as the need for strategic forms of strategic solutions for addressing affordable housing. We're not only looking at low-income families and renters in particular, but also the needs of middle-income families. At a May council meeting, a resolution was put forward that identified the need to look at homelessness and low-income families within our downtown core, and that was connected to the vulnerable population that may be impacted by the incoming university, as well as growth pressures that are faced within the downtown area. So in terms of some of the barriers that we have identified through the needs assessment, the high-level barriers that we are familiar with or are commonly understood include financial barriers, such as development charges and planning fees, as well as the development approvals process. So those are things that we often hear from developers and those who provide affordable housing. However, there are some opportunities for the city to look at, such as providing innovative housing solutions and improving partnerships and collaboration. Did I skip a slide here? Sorry, there we go. So this slide just shows the core state of housing affordability in Brampton. So across Peel, Brampton has the highest proportion of residents who are struggling with affordability. So 34% of households in Brampton are spending more than 30% of their income on shelter. And this is quite consistent with the definition of affordability contained within provincial policy. And that chart shows where Mississauga stands. So they are trailing slightly behind, where 31% of their households are in a core need of housing affordability. Okay. Sorry. So when we look at that information in greater detail, we see that 31% of homeowners, so those who own their own home, cannot afford average home ownership costs. And that equates to about 41,795 households who are struggling to maintain their home. While you look at renters, we can see that 43.5% of renters across Brampton cannot afford average monthly rental costs, and that equates to 14,620 households. So we see that affordability is more of an issue for renters than owners. And this is a considerable shift that we've seen over the past 5 years. At the bottom of this slide, there is some information on our secondary rental market. So Brampton represents 27% of Peel's secondary rental market. And as part of that, that does include second units. So today, under our second units registration program, we have 466 legal registered second units. Brampton's current vacancy rate stands at 1.3%, and the city has been below a 2% vacancy rate for quite some time, and we understand that a 3% vacancy rate represents a healthy or a balanced market. So there is a need to promote the development of purpose-built rental units in Brampton, as well as acknowledging the importance of second units. This slide speaks to Brampton's, the composition of Brampton households. So we are trending towards larger families in Brampton. I don't think that's a surprise to any of us. Nearly 50% of families in the city are composed of 4 or more people, and this has been consistent over the past 10 years. And 82% of all private dwellings in Brampton contain 3 or more bedrooms. So we did a scan to see where Brampton stood in comparison to other large municipalities across the country. So this chart shows that Brampton has the highest proportion of multifamily households at 11.6%. In behind us, or second to Brampton, was Surrey, BC, as well as Markham, Ontario, that had about 8% of households being multifamily households. So we can clearly see that Brampton is driving up Peel's percentage of multiple family households. Mississauga and Caledon have rates of 5.2% and 4.7% respectively. So there is a considerable difference. So when we think of income, Brampton has the lowest average income rate across Peel. So unfortunately, increases in household income over the past several years has not been at the same pace as increases in house prices. The average value of private dwellings has increased by 71% over the past 7 years. Comparatively, household income has only increased by 21.6% during the same period. So you see disproportionate increases when you look at the increase of housing prices and income. So this slide just looks at construction by structural type over the past 8 years. So single detached dwellings still represent the largest proportion of housing units in Brampton. However, we are starting to see a significant increase in townhouses. So our development department has received most of the applications that we have received have been for townhouses and stacked townhouses. So we anticipate that over the next 2 to 3 years, townhouses would represent a significant share of units constructed in the city. Also, there was a recent report from Ryerson University that was launched, and it identified that townhouses will be the new reality for millennials, for those who are able to penetrate the housing market. So this slide just shows some of the information from Peel Region's needs assessment. It represents their housing targets and the results that were presented or endorsed by Regional Council on April 5th of this year. So Peel has identified, or I guess designated, housing targets for the city. So on an annual basis, Brampton will require 18 emergency shelter and transitional beds, as well as 360 affordable housing units for low-income families. So this looks at an overall allocation of 7,500 units across the region of Peel on an annual basis. And a lot of our work is dependent on the information that we've obtained from the region of Peel. In terms of recommendations, within the report, we identify the need for housing to be adaptable. We understand that there are shifts in demographic trends. There are still strong preferences for ground-related forms of housing. However, we have to reconcile that with provincial policy, the direction of provincial policy to direct affordable housing in transit-supportive areas, so areas that are close to transit and services. And we also understand that strategic partnerships and collaboration are needed with all levels of government as well as housing providers to improve housing affordability in the city. So the findings of our needs assessment was presented at the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee meeting of June 11th. As well, the results of our assessment will be used to inform our benchmarking work and will also guide some of our public consultation and engagement work. Moving forward, the next steps will include research on student housing as part of our overarching housing strategy, looking at innovative forms of housing such as multi-generational housing options, and also a review of tools and incentives that are needed to support the creation of affordable housing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Jeffrey?
At the same time we're dealing with this report?
Yeah, I said at the beginning, we're bringing them all forward at the time. Yep.
I just want to thank staff for all the work that they've done. I'm happy to move both the delegation and the report. The only suggestion I would have is the Housing Advisory Committee has only met twice, and I am reluctant to send this out for public consultation while the Housing Advisory Committee is still gathering information. I understand from the last meeting they're still collecting data. So I would say that if we gave them a little more time and then they came back to this committee, I'd be much happier than if they went out without a robust public consultation package. And I think if we were to wait just a few months, we might know more about what the province is prepared to partner with us as well. So at this point, I think it's premature to go out to public consultation, and happy to listen to what the rest of council thinks or committee thinks, but I think it would be premature at this point. There's some information here, but I don't think it's as complete as it could be. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Miles?
Sorry, I'm a little bit surprised by the mayor's comments. As I sit on the Affordable Housing Committee, and I really feel my opening comments were going to be that it was really amazing how quickly the city of Brampton has been able to move forward in looking at the whole issue of affordable housing through this committee and come up with some pretty concrete policies. And the reason why they've been able to do that is the partnerships that they formed. So we have been able to take the information that the region of Peel has been working on and studying over a long long period of time, demographic information and the Affordable Housing Committee at the Region of Peel. All of this information is readily available, so the municipality has been able to take that information and really come up with, I think, a good strategy for moving forward. Can you put up the chart with the pieces of the pie that shows area of responsibility? Yeah, that one. So if you take a look at this, I think this is a really good demonstration of areas of responsibility, but shows how the City of Brampton play into the overall picture. So while the Region of Peel is responsible for ensuring more affordable social housing, there is a real role that the City of Brampton can play in ensuring that we meet some of the targets on the chart that show where areas of need for the City of Brampton are. So the chart with the priorities, sorry. Okay, go back. Yeah, you had it back there. Youth homelessness, okay. So if you look at this particular chart, youth homelessness is a priority at the Region of Peel. One youth shelter has been built and they are actively in the area of looking for an additional site right away. And the next three actually identify really clearly the areas that the City of Brampton can have an impact. And that is the kind of work that we have to do through our planning department. So, I think it's pretty clear that what we as a municipality can do in order to help the whole area of affordable housing in our municipality, and I think community engagement has got to be key, because if we don't have the community engaged and buying into the fact that we have to look at high density residential, we have to look at townhouses in their neighborhoods, we're going to continue to have what we have at every planning committee meeting, and that's a group of residents saying we don't want that in our backyard, we don't want that in our neighborhood. What I am concerned about is I keep seeing applications in planning coming in before us, and we're not looking at them from the affordable housing lens. And so my question to you, Mr. Elliott, is how do we do that right away? So we have applications coming to public meeting for higher density residential in certain areas around the city, and we know that they are going to meet one of those three targets that we have, but we don't have that affordable housing lens over it. Can we ask that all planning applications be vetted for meeting some of the affordable housing targets that we have in the City of Brampton?
So through the chair, under our current legislative framework that we work within, it's actually very difficult for municipality to regulate housing prices outside of where it's social housing provided through the region and funded through that government. For us as a planning department to dictate what the selling price of a house would be, there's very few.
That's not what I'm saying. Sorry, that's not what I'm saying.
Sorry, maybe I can better understand. And
no, that's not what I'm saying. Is that we know in the City of Brampton we need more rental accommodation and we need higher density because our rental rate is so low. So if we have an application that comes in front of us for someone to build high density residential, high density residential in a neighborhood in the City of Brampton, we should be taking a look at that and saying, yeah, that meets part of our identified need in the City of Brampton for affordability. So nothing to do with the cost, just simply taking a look at it and saying, we know we need more high density residential, so it should get a big check mark when it comes to evaluating the project.
so through the chair, sorry, now I better understand what you're actually asking of us. And That's actually a good strategy that we're employing right now. And as we're updating our official plan policies, we are looking at more mixed use opportunities and different types of housing forms that we'd be seeking through policy. And that way, that would be ingrained in policy. It would make it easier for applicants to bring that type of housing forward. When it comes to rental versus market, again, it's very difficult for us to have any levers to control that. But through the market conditions right now, we're actually seeing a number of market rental units that we hadn't seen in the past. So we are seeing a shift, and you also heard about the shift towards more townhouse typology than we've seen in the past as well. So I think the market is reacting out there, but we are also going to be bringing forward updated planning policy that will make it easier to see that type of mixed use.
Good. Okay, so for applicants that are already in the stream, though, we would be taking a look at them in regards to when we're evaluating them.
Through the chair, we haven't got any kind of a structured toolkit that prioritizes their checklist or has a checklist for those. But suffice it to say that we as planners are keenly interested in seeing this type of achievement happening. So that would lend itself towards favorable staff positions on these things.
Okay. So can you at some point have that as part of the overall, as a policy when you're reviewing applications?
So through the chair, I think through our strategy that we're undertaking right now, that's probably where we're going to be landing at, is some kind of a mechanism to support these types of alternative housing formats and mixed housing formats.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to move the recommendations in the report. I think we need to get moving on this strategy, and the sooner the better. So I do support it. Thank you.
Councillor Bowman?
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. The Peel housing targets, 6.1-16, are those targets based on every year moving forward for a certain period of time? Rob, I don't know if this is for you or if...
So through the chair, those are the annual targets set by the region.
Okay, annual targets set by the region, and I don't sit at the region, so perhaps somebody from the region can answer me. How is the region going to ensure that these numbers are hit every year?
Again, through the chair, there's only so many levers that we in municipal government have. This would be certainly something that they would advocate for funding, and they would hold themselves accountable toward not only delivery of social housing, but changing their policy, which would help support this type of achievement.
Okay. It says we have, as of 2017, a wait list for subsidized housing of 13,597. So an average wait time is 6.5 years. So with these Peel housing targets, does anybody know the math? Is this making a dent? Is it bringing it down to 6 years? Is it status quo, or are people still going to be waiting 6.5 years, even though we're adding this number of houses every year?
So through the chair, the toughest part of controlling that, obviously we want to change the dynamics out there, but what is available versus what the demand is. One of the challenges we have on that wait list is it's not static, and in fact it's not limited to those who reside in Peel Region today either. So if we in Peel Region or in the city of Brampton do a tremendous job of accommodating and addressing the affordable housing issue, it's almost a gift that keeps giving. So we've got to move forward. We've got to encourage our neighbors to do the same. But it's a challenge to maintain that and give it any precision around when you would get down to a number that's more palatable.
And that's, yeah, sure. Councillor Miles.
You're back on the list.
On to Jeff's question.
You're waiting until we go back to your list. Go back on again.
If you want me to, but I can
It's better
respond
'cause
to
we have
it.
a couple of-
I've got another couple of questions too, so.
Okay.
Yeah. And I thank you, Councillor Miles, since you're on that committee, for being able to respond. So in the Peel housing targets, we're looking at 6.5 years. Is there a reasonable number that we're trying to get that down to? Like 3 or 1 or 0? And my whole line of questioning is the Peel numbers that we're targeting, if they're not getting us anywhere near improvement in the situation, what numbers are we actually looking at, or should we be looking at for Peel? And I know that's a rhetorical question, and I think Councillor Miles may help answer that. But so I'll just go on to my last question. It says here since 2015 we've had 466 second units. Those would be registered second units, registered non-conforming, a mixture of both. What would that be, that total?
Through the chair, that's the number of registered units under our system here. We recognize that there's a number that are not, and through council's wisdom last year, we set up the task force and advisory committee so that we are actually seeing a large number coming in for registration. So I think that's making a difference.
Okay, so large numbers. There's been estimates we've got up to 20,000 illegal second units in Brampton, so maybe more. So, Rob, when you say the large numbers are coming in, is it comparable to the actual number that exists out there, or is it still a pie-in-the-sky number that we're dealing with?
Through the chair, I think it's fair to say we've got a fair bit of work ahead of us in terms of bringing them all on stream and licensing and legitimizing them all. But I think the uptake has been quite good in terms of going through the legal process these days.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is good. I'm happy we're adding units, but the numbers just don't seem to add up to me that we're making a huge difference. We're going to be making a difference in the lives of a handful, but you know, for 6.5 years, if you're on a waiting list for affordable housing, that's a long time for a family. So, thank you, and Councillor Miles, I look forward to your input as well.
Councillor Movieri?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to staff, I've had many people call me that live in basement apartments, and they're looking to move into a Peel Region assisted housing because obviously it's a better place to live, and so it would be interesting to know whether obviously these people who are on the list live somewhere. They're not living on the street. They're living with a relative. They're living maybe with a parent, you know, brother, sister, basement apartments, and so on. It would also be interesting to know whether the demand has been increasing province-wide, because my understanding is people apply in different municipalities, so the same person could be on 5 different lists, different municipalities. So these numbers could be bloated across the GTA because the one person is on maybe 5 lists. So is there any way to find out whether the people who are on the list, if they are on other municipalities' lists, and if the numbers are actually going up, or they're going down, or if there's some kind of headway made to you know, provide housing for people who need it. You know, sometime when we get these numbers, they could be, they may not be realistic, can I say? Because some of these people could be on other municipal lists also. So is there a way of, when we're doing this review, is to try to, for people when they apply, to tell us if they've applied elsewhere, so that then we can get a realistic number of how many units are actually needed in the province?
Through the chair, as I understand it, I believe the Region of Peel staff were trying to do an assessment about the wait list and looking at who might be on multiple lists and such. I think that there's no question about the fact that there is a high demand out there. That's a legitimate demand. and the challenge of actually meeting that, we won't have an oversupply issue anytime soon, I think is a fair statement. Insofar as what our neighboring municipalities are experiencing, I think it's fair to say that housing prices and income levels, the rate at which they've both been rising, are problematic, not just in Brampton, but our adjacent municipalities and across the country for that matter. So I think the affordability issue is not unique here to Brampton. I think many municipalities are facing this. So I wouldn't think it's a unique to Brampton situation. But I could certainly inquire with my colleagues at the region and figure out if there's any further assessment on the wait list.
Yeah, and my understanding too is that a lot of the demand that comes from single parent families, be men or women, people break up, and now they have to find a place. They have to sell their home, and they have to go and find a place to live. And a lot of them are living in basement apartments. Obviously, these people who are on this list are living somewhere, and they're just trying to find a better place to live, subsidized, that is, government housing. So I understand the urgency and I understand the need, but it'd also be good to know whether this number is spiraling out of control or whether we're making some headway province-wide. I think it's important because when you see these numbers, it's 13,000. They could be waiting elsewhere too, and obviously they're living somewhere. They're not on the street. These people. So the thing is that from my perspective, government is doing, federal and provincial governments are providing the funding, and they're obviously have a lot of needs, priorities. Whether this is one on the top or not, I think that health is probably the most important priority. Everybody wants to be looked after when they get sick, but yeah, I would really like to see some realistic numbers rather than just these very bloated numbers. If we could get that number, it would be, to me, it would be useful to see exactly how much need really is there for government housing.
So through the chair, I'll certainly make some inquiries, again, with my colleagues at the region, but I could assure you that whether there's a small or modest adjustment to people who might be on multiple lists, the demands are quite high. We can all appreciate that. I think we do have a target to bring affordability into check here. The reality is that we've got a lot of work ahead of us. So we can put a lot of energy into this, and we should. There's different ways that we can solve affordability problems. To your point, many people do have places that they're living today, but unfortunately some of them result in overcrowding. You're having to live with relatives in an unwelcomed environment. So certainly less than ideal. It's not good for one's health. It's not good for raising children. So there's a number of pressures. But to answer your question, let me look to my colleagues and find out what I can find out about the further dive into the wait list.
And that's fine, but again, through the chair, us meeting the demand it's all related to funding, and funding doesn't come from municipal taxes; it comes from either provincial or federal sources. So, this effort we're making at the municipal level is we're trying to encourage more affordable rental units for developers to build, and we know that that's not been happening for a number of years, and maybe you may know the reason why it's the development community is not addressing this need, whether it's just not worth their while or it doesn't pay off. But there's a problem there, and and I think that's where at the root of the problem is how do you get more private enterprise to invest for this kind of need, and I don't know whether there's an answer to that or not, and perhaps through the study there may be some ideas that come forward. So, thank you.
Councilor Pleshy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I first wanted to say that currently around this table, we have the president of Peel Living. So I really want to listen to what she has to say with some of the comments and questions but I'd also like to know from you, Councillor Miles, is what engagement did you have during this process? 'Cause I'm sure they reached out to you to talk to you about this, and how did that go? And that's kind of the question. So it's direct to Councillor Miles, as the current president of Peel Living.
Okay, Councillor Miles is next. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, well, first off, I think it's unfortunate that the mayor isn't here, because the Brampton Housing Task Force is made up of individuals and stakeholders from across the region of Peel, and these are people and individuals who have some stake in providing housing to the community. So we have, of course, the region of Peel, Peel Housing, we have the faith community, we have builders, developers, we have Habitat for Humanity, we have our great staff from the city of Brampton. So in the 2 meetings that we've actually had, there's been a lot of information that has come from the stakeholder groups in order to provide the kind of information the staff are able to provide to council today. And this is good information. None of the statistics that you have before you have been done hastily. This is information that's been provided, a lot of it by the region of Peel, who have staff that do this demographic work all the time. So it's pretty bang on. In regards to some of the questions that Jeff asked in regards to the 13,000 people on the wait list, and Councillor Sprovieri alluded to it. This is a complex issue, and when you're looking at affordable housing, there's a lot of reasons why we are sitting in the position that we are in the region of Peel. One of the big drivers is the fact that we have an awful lot of new immigrants, and we're close to the airport. So a lot of the immigrants that land in the international airport, they end up in either Toronto or the region of Peel. Some go to Toronto and then end up in the region of Peel. It has to do with income levels, et cetera, et cetera. So that 13,000 households, that's all to do with supply and demand. There's virtually no affordable rental housing stock available within all of the region of Peel, and we're not building enough quick enough to meet the demand. So when you talk about the 13,000 and what is the region of Peel doing about that, we have a housing and homelessness strategy at the region of Peel. We've been very active. Peel Living, which I'm the president of, has 40-something properties. We've taken a look at every single one of them, and where we can intensify, we're going to be intensifying. We've been offering partnerships to developers in the region of Peel, and we've had take-up. We've been buying condos for affordable social housing units in condominiums. A Daniels property in the city of Mississauga, we bought quite a number of units within those properties. So we're trying to look outside of the box. We're trying to look at opportunities wherever they fall. But again, it all comes down to getting enough housing stock available for people so that they're not forced into these illegal basement apartments. And that's where the city can help. The city's business really isn't in social housing. That's the region of Peel's responsibility. But we can ensure that we approve more stock that's going to meet the needs of that affordable section. But having said all that, this is one of the main reasons why every councillor in the city of Brampton should sit at the region of Peel as well, right? Because that's where you're seeing the gaps. And if if you did, you would be aware of all of the work that the region of, it's one of the number one priorities that the region has undertaken during this last term of council, is trying to ensure that there's a greater supply of affordable housing for residents. I'm not talking, I mean social housing for residents within the region of Peel, but that's where Brampton comes in. I know it's complicated because there's so many different factions of what we're trying to reach when we're reaching affordable. It's not just homelessness, it's not just support for people with the vulnerable population, but it's also, in a lot of cases, your children and grandchildren and the neighbors' children who may have a university degree but still can't afford, they can't find an apartment to rent, and they can't afford to purchase a home with prices that they are. So it's really has to be a collaboration of all four partners working together. So that's why I'm really glad. The city, we used to sit back and say, not our problem. And this is the first term, and I know our new director of policy has a background in social housing. That's great, because we're going to be looking for some expertise in that area so that we can get this thing going. So let's pass the report. It's unfortunate the mayor didn't talk to me, being the only member of council on this committee, and I would have encouraged her to allow this to move forward, because we're already years behind, and the region of Peel is the lowest and has been the lowest funded by the province of Ontario for as long as I can remember in most of our human service and social service areas. So that's another reason why we're not as good as everybody else.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Councillor Willens?
Just quickly, I'd like to thank staff for this report and for Councillor Miles for clarifying a lot of this up here, because it was a lot of read, and thank you.
Okay, good. I want to thank Councillor Miles for what she said there, because it's been a real eye-opener at the region. It's almost like the way we classify what we're trying to do, city, in brackets you have cities, affordable housing strategy. It's much more than that, as Councillor Miles has said. It really should be maybe named mixed housing needs or something like that, because there's so much more to it. I mean, we can get into the needs for housing for dementia and all those type of things that we're dealing with at the region. Very good article in the Star this week. I don't know if you all saw it on what the butterfly thing that they're doing at the region. Excellent, excellent. My wife read it and she was in tears, and it really brought a lot to our heart when we're at the region. But we're really looking at housing in a different perspective than we used to. And I remember when I first got on council, when people talked about affordable housing, it was like a bad word. And I think to some people it still is. They feel like it's a bad word. It's not just about affordable housing, though. It's about a different mix of housing that we need. And I know Councillor Moore, the Chair of Planning, is really been pushing, these other communities where they have like 4- and 6-story buildings for housing. And at first, when she started talking to me about that, I didn't kind of agree with her until I went and looked at some. And on our way up to the cottage in a small town, they have some beautiful ones up there that are just spectacular looking. I think they'd be great for Brampton. And I don't want to call them affordable housing, but they're different types of housing. And that's exactly what we need across the region of Peel and City of Brampton. So thank you, Councillor Miles, for that. I'm assuming that with the Mayor's absence now, you'll move the report, okay? And move the presentation. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. We'll bring forward 7.3, and which is in your package listed as item 6, and we have a presentation by Antoinetta. Welcome. I hope your presentation is as compelling as the last one.
That's going to be a tough one. Good afternoon, Chair, members of Council, fellow staff, and members of the public. Councillor Gibson, you segued this for me. So some of you thought I may not have been here this soon back after the endorsement of the vision, but here I am, and I'm happy to be here in my new role as Manager of Community Innovation and Resilience to share with you the first of many presentations to come with the implementation of Brampton's 2040 vision. What I'm here to talk about is one of 3 initiatives we have mobilized quickly on after the endorsement of the vision. So while we're continuing to develop a robust implementation plan, there are 3 main ways that we're currently implementing the vision. The first is policy-based work. A report in your agenda package earlier today, namely item 7.4, addressed a planning policy roadmap as well as some immediate items for mobilization, such as our Sustainable Community Development Guidelines and better utilization of Section 37 of the Planning Act. The second stream is process-based work. At a future planning committee, a report will be presented on our continuous improvement exercises that are redefining the way the planning department plans. The third is project-based work, and that's where the neighborhood audit comes into it. It's an example, and it's one that we will be discussing today. So the Brampton 2040 vision, as you recall, was unanimously endorsed on May 7th. Vision 3 in that plan addresses neighborhoods, and Vision 3.1 specifically called for a complete neighborhood audit. The neighborhood audit builds on the momentum created by the vision and empowers the many residents who fed into the vision process that want to work with the city and their communities to make a difference at the neighborhood level. So let's learn a bit more about it together. The purpose of a neighborhood audit is to support communities, to work for social justice and equity in our neighborhoods, to inspire ideas for change in neighborhoods and think innovatively, to provide support for those ideas, and to encourage grassroots participation in neighborhood planning and other city initiatives, as well and more generally to include and promote civic engagement across the residents of Brampton. So as for the neighborhood audits themselves, to inform the baseline for how we conduct our audits, as you can imagine, like many other projects, we benchmark a number of communities and organizations to learn from their experiences. Based on our research to date, this stands to become one of the most comprehensive audits in North America. And this is because audits typically tend to focus on a single area of interest. You may have heard of walking audits or audits from an environmental focus. Brampton's tool, the one that staff is proposing today, will look at the neighborhood at a much more comprehensive level. So how will we undertake that? First, we need to develop a baseline neighborhood profile. So here we need to define boundaries in consultation with the community and provide them with basic demographic information regarding the neighborhood composition. So things that we're used to and that are collected by all sorts of censuses. So age, race, income, crime, etc. The second piece will be to do a walk in those neighborhoods with the community members. Neighborhood walks will be conducted in groups, and there you'll have local experts, community members, as well as staff. Then we move to mental mapping exercises. This exercise wants to understand the qualitative aspects of a neighborhood and communities, so ones that are not easily ascertained through typical census data. So the group will create mental maps of the neighborhood. They'll identify key amenities, community facilities, issues, and problems. They might cite things like school, health clinics, grocery stores, dimly lit areas. We also want them to fill out a survey, and the survey will have a series of perception-based questions, and things like this might be asked. Does the timing at pedestrian lights allow for older people and children in your neighborhood to cross safely? Have you noticed anything that can be improved in that area? Are there enough trees or shade in your neighborhood? Is there any public art or cultural amenities in your neighborhood? And do you feel safe in your neighborhood? This is a small sample of a longer range of questions that might be asked. The next is to look at the neighborhood performance. This is to understand the quantitative performance of neighborhoods. This can be achieved using the city's Sustainable Community Development Guidelines and understand performance from an energy management perspective, walkability, water management, local food production, and other natural systems. Finally, what we'd like to develop is an action plan for the neighborhoods. Community members, along with city staff, will discuss in a workshop format actions that can be taken to develop their neighborhoods. This will result in a detailed action plan. The goal of the action plan is to inspire ownership of neighborhoods and grassroots actions for better communities. So one of the challenges when you conduct a neighborhood audit is the expectations that you create with the community. And we want to manage those and be clear about what the purpose is. This program is about teaching residents what they can do as individuals, what they can do as a collective, and in which instances we can partner to make better neighborhoods. So how might this be funded, you ask? Well, working in partnership with our service innovation and corporate performance team, we are analyzing all grants and any in-kind contributions to consolidate and more effectively allocate the funds that we have. As you may recall, when Mr. Beasley was touring Brampton, one of his observations was that Brampton is a fairly undifferentiated landscape. You can't tell where you are from one part of the city to the other. In other words, it's called the geography of nowhere. Through these audits, we want to inspire community members to build their neighborhoods to reflect the population in whatever form that might manifest itself in. In our review of the literature and through conversations with other agencies, it's becoming obvious that in order for this to truly be complete neighborhood audit, it needs to be founded on all of the pillars of sustainability, and they're there in front of you: social issues, environmental, economic, and cultural, and how each of these may manifest themselves within the neighborhoods. Our partners. To achieve communities that truly represent these 4 pillars, we have been identifying potential partnerships and leveraging partnerships made throughout the vision process to help contribute to and bring subject matter expertise to strengthening the tool. We have several internal partners. Leveraging existing resources and synergies is a key aspect of our work. So I'll give you an example. From our emergency management office, community preparedness in terms of weather and health-related emergencies can help to build resilient neighborhoods. There's also the SERVE program through our emergency management office, community emergency response volunteers, so be creating awareness about that. Another example is working with Peel Police and leveraging the great work they've done through their crime prevention through environmental design. And here to contextualize that for Planning Committee, I'd like to give an example. So at a certain point in the history of my neighborhood, Peel Village, there was a high number of break-ins, and I talked to a local police officer about what I as an individual can do, and I learned that they have a whole list of things that you can do to your house to help prevent break-ins on your particular house, and they were simple, low-cost sort of actions that can help. So sometimes it can be just as simple as letting people know about the resources that exist, what's out there, and what other partners can help. Needless to say, Peel Police is very excited about our partnerships. All of our partners will act as subject matter experts to inform the tool in its development. We also plan on using our advisory committees, age-friendly, environmental, inclusion and health, inclusion and equity, etc., to help review and refine the tool. Our tool will then be further validated through the initial pilots that we're proposing, and findings will be reported back to Council. What we realized is that groups internally and externally had or have been individually pursuing the development of tools for specific focus areas. This tool that we're proposing aims to eliminate those redundancies and encourage collaboration by consolidating all of those fragmented efforts. Our team has conducted a preliminary study to determine, let's see if that changes, thank you, to determine neighborhood boundaries in Brampton. These neighborhoods have been identified by a 10-minute walk to a point of interest. That could either be a shopping area, a rec center, or a place of worship. Neighborhoods were also determined based on physical and natural constraints, such as major roads or valley lands. All of this information is preliminary and must be confirmed through public input and engagement. Through our pilot, we hope to test 3 neighborhoods, one old, one middle-aged, and a new community. These communities will be validated and finalized with our partners, but we are thinking about Bram East in the Gore Road area, Bramalea as our older neighborhood, and then a neighborhood in Bram West. Downtown is not being considered at this time because it is arguably one of Brampton's most complete communities. Another aspect of the tool is that it helps build support for future development applications. If, for example, the community helps pre-identify where in their neighborhoods they would be happy or open to density, then we change the NIMBY, the not in my backyard, to yes in my backyard. So what do the next steps look like for the team? We would like to identify any additional partners and ensure that we haven't missed anyone and just keep that ability to opt in open. We'd like to develop metrics and refine the questions that we're looking at, pilot the tool within 3 neighborhoods over the summer, and report the findings back to council. We're confident through this program that we can build innovative and resilient neighborhoods founded on the 4 principles of sustainability, and we're excited to get started on the journey of implementing our vision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Antoinetta, I love it. I think it's amazing. In the 90s, it was called Neighborhood Watch. In the 2000s, it was called the Good Neighbors, Great Neighborhood Program. In Brampton, we had a toolkit when we went into neighborhoods, recognizing that it wasn't always just about crime and safety. It was also about all of the other issues that face the community. So you might want to get some of the information that was utilized. But one of the other areas that I think is really key and is going to be very helpful for you is through the region of Peel. They have done they have a study that looks at neighborhoods and shows what neighborhoods are at greater risk than other neighborhoods based on a number of different factors and variables. So that work, I don't know if it was done through the school board. Rob probably knows, but that should be very helpful in this plan.
So through you, Madam Chair, we have looked at the Region of Peel's work. They're one of our founding partners, and we want to use that for the profile of the neighborhoods. So we want to leverage, again, all that great work that's been done. For the tool, though, as I said, for the launch and the sort of pilot, we're looking at 3 neighborhoods not based on risk or those kind of factors right now. But if council deems that the program should become something permanent after the pilot, then all the risk factors will be what we prioritize our systematic update of all the neighborhoods across the city with.
Well, you pick Bramalea, and there's a big portion of Bramalea that is an at-risk neighborhood because it has the highest density of apartment buildings in that area, new immigrants, single family. So there's some lots, lots there to work with. So I'd be happy to give you any support that you need in that area as well.
Thank you, Councillor Miles.
Thank you. Good job.
Kashi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is a lot of information here. And I wanted to start by saying, Antoinette, I think you're nuts. Everything it really looks fantastic. Like I said, I'm not sure where to start. Well, first I'll start. Can I get you to go before the Brampton Safety Advisory Committee to discuss this with them, have those comments? I could answer 4 of the 4 questions that you had asked for the areas that I represent. The first one I couldn't answer because of the lights, but the last 3 are no to those 3 questions. I guess it's I just don't know how we're going to start this. I don't know when it's supposed to be completed. I know some of it sounds like it's coming back, or some of it's going to be completed in the summer. So I guess I'll start off by asking my first question. When do you think that this will all be completed? Or is it an ongoing, and it will probably never be completed?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the first question about the committee, yes, it's our plan to go to the advisory committees of council, present the tool. We've kept them sort of in the loop with all the vision, so it would just be the same because there's so much knowledge there and we don't want to lose on that. Second, in terms of when we be complete, this current report is proposing a pilot, but should the program become permanent, it would be endless, because by the time you do sort of all of our communities, you'd have to start again, because now you're 20, 30 years into it and the demands are always changing. But it is opening ourselves to sort of empowering our community to look at their neighborhoods, tell us what's wrong, but also figuring out themselves what role they have to play in that. So it could be an endless process. Yeah.
And which is good.
Which
It's the right thing
it's
to
great.
do. When do, I guess, how much funds do we have to put into an audit like this?
So the main goal for right now is the pilot. We're going to absorb that operation with what we have, and so there's no extra costs affiliated with that. But like I said, we have partnered with our friends at Service Innovation and Corporate Performance to look at all the granting the city does, because we do a lot of great work and we help out a lot of communities, but consolidate all of that into one bucket and one sort of community investment tool, and then we would use that to fund this should it become permanent. But part of it shouldn't need too much resources, in the sense that we want to let people know what exists and what doesn't exist. So through our emergency management office, we found out if you have a shut-in or an elderly person in your neighborhood, there's a plan for how to help those, and you can get resourced for that. People don't know things like that. Or there's free training in the event of an emergency. Part of it is the city does all these great things and people don't know about it. So a strategy that we've added to our audit is that when we're doing it, we're going to encourage people, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. How can we let you know all the great things the city's up to? And then other things are the free things. Did you know about SEPTED and the little, I'll give you an example. I bought an Amazon camera for outside my house, cost me $10 on Amazon. I put it outside, it's fake, it doesn't work, but Peel Police have studies that show that that works, and it helps people in our neighborhood come together and realize, oh, it could be something as small as that. So the point of this is that not all of it is a huge upfront investment by the city, but empowering the community and teaching them about the tools at Region of Peel, Peel Police, TRCA, and CVC, and all those partners. It's just bringing all of that energy and all of that sort of community wellness together into a more holistic picture.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's what I was trying to get to, is the fact that a lot of the stuff that's out there we currently do, and we're doing it now. And I had just had a meeting with 15 mothers on Friday that, because of the early Peel District School Board, or the Catholic School Board, had canceled the early on centers. And I had a few mothers, crying, saying, "What am I going to do with our child now?" and stuff. And they didn't realize that the region currently, has a lot of those services in place, and we're doing more for them. So, and I got to talking to them, and they really didn't realize a lot of things that the city of Brampton provides, the region of Peel provides, and ongoing. And I talked about communication and how we get that communication out to people, or how they search and find that communication. So I'm glad you talked about that, and I think that's going to be a huge part of it.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, the key to unlocking a piece of this is we're hoping the back of our document will have all of these listings in one place, so people know what's available, and then we would theme them according to what people might be interested. So it could be family and children, it could be nature and trails, and just letting people know that all these other programs exist, because through the vision and that community engagement, the data tells us that people are not aware of the great things city and our partners do, and so we have to find ways to get it out there, and we think the neighborhood tool is an effective way of doing that.
And I think and I'll finish this off through you, Mr. Chair, the best tool I find is people telling people. So I think that we need that to be incorporated in every discussion that we have. Tell as many people as possible so that they understand, and so on. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Plessis, would you like to move receipt of the report, or the delegation, and move the report?
Sure.
Okay, all in favor? That carries. Okay, we'll move on. Our next report is 7.3, pulled by Councilor Plessis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I'd like to start by asking for an overview on this. There's a lot of information in here. I guess, and that overview in particular, we talked about a little bit about about it earlier with the housing strategy, but section 37, and then the changes in the development process, the fact that, we were talking about them last year, they're here before us, reducing the 7 to 9 months down to the 3 to 9 months in one stream, 3 other streams. So I'd like to kind of get a high-level overview, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Is that what council wants? Committee wants?
What I want.
Well, it's not what you want, it's what we want, all of us.
Okay.
Okay? Okay. Can staff give us a 30-second overview?
5 minutes.
Oh, less than that. Still got a lot of agenda to do here.
The agenda here, Mr. Chair, I think shouldn't be handcuffed by this. There's a lot of information.
Yeah, I know, I read it.
And I did too.
I don't need an overview, so.
Interesting.
I'm not sure staff are ready to do an overview.
Through the chair, we didn't pull together a formal presentation, but we'd be happy to highlight some of the key items here that might be of interest to you. If you can just give us a quick second.
Okay.
Or if you want, Councilor Pleshy, we could refer it back to the next meeting, having.
How about I just ask some direct questions then, if staff aren't prepared to give an overview. I guess directly in section 37, the city of Brampton's now trying to utilize this section, but what does that look like?
Through the chair, as a reminder, section 37 of the Planning Act allows for the municipality to secure, for the lack of a better word, voluntary contributions when somebody's exceeding the densities permitted under the official plan. So, for instance, if I had a parcel of land and I knew that the official plan allowed me to build 50 units and I wanted to build 70 units, what that allows me to do is for that increment of the 20 units, I can attract some kind of a additional contribution that would benefit the community. There's a list under the Planning Act that would allow for things like additional park space or the contributions towards affordable housing. There's a myriad of things that's available to you. And quite rightly, we have not actually implemented this section in any meaningful way here in the city in the past. So we think this is the time is right. We're seeing more densities being proposed here in the city. So there's certainly an opportunity now to utilize this. So if a developer is looking for that extra density by way of permissions through the municipality, there's an opportunity to get something in return. So we're going to put together a program through our official plan update that would outline when and where this is appropriate and what we're trying to achieve through that bonusing provision.
Rob, I know what section 37 is. I'm asking what we're looking to do. We must have some kind of idea of what we're going to be asking the development community per unit, per, I don't know how you measure it, but that's kind of what I'm asking you. What are we going to be asking?
So through the chair, those specifics, actually, we're still undertaking that assessment right now. As I mentioned, it could be a myriad of additional green space or park space. It could be monetary contributions towards affordable housing units. That's one thing we want to consult with the industry on as well, though. It is used in other municipalities, but we want to make sure when we implement it, it's done in an effective way and one that's supported by the industry as well.
Okay, and that's good, but I guess the report indicates that we'll be utilizing section 37 of the Planning Act for density bonusing, and I guess before, we receive something, I guess you'll be coming back in the future to committee or to council with what that looks like prior to.
Through the chair, we would be putting together a package around density bonusing, and that would be included in a future update with council.
Okay, great.
The next term of council, it says on the overview.
Yep. Streamlined development process was discussed last year. We talked about 7 to 9 months. It was a great initiative when you first started reducing the wait time. How is that coming along from, I guess it's been almost a year, right, since we first discussed, or maybe 2 years?
Through the chair, The concept of streamlining some of our processes was almost a year ago when we started talking about that. So we rolled out a process on site plans that now has 4 streams depending on their complexity. So one that's got little complexity can go through in very short order. What we've also looked at, though, is a more robust pre-consultation process. That way an applicant can come get a better idea of, some of the challenges or the objectives that the city is trying to accomplish earlier on, and that was turned around in a much shorter time frame than in the past. As we were undertaking this, though, some legislative changes came our way via Bill 139, which is really tied to the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal, the new OMB. We're going to be bringing forward a report in July that's going to highlight some of those changes as well. So there's some obligations that we have on our end to do things a little differently within certain timeframes. It also puts greater clarity on applicants about what they have to bring forward to make a complete submission as well. So that's also changed the way that we're going to be bringing reports forward to council and the time in which we have to make decisions.
Good. And I guess I'll go back to, Councillor Gibson just reminded that it will be coming back in the new term of council, but it does say that, however, there are some of the things that you're going to start the process on now. And I guess I'm not clear in this report on what things are going to be starting now and what kind of are going to be waiting until we look further into and get more detail back on.
Certainly, through the chair, specific to process improvements, that's something we didn't feel necessitated any kind of direction from council. We're finding efficiencies, we're finding process improvements to make the process more transparent, clearer for everybody to understand, and trying to reduce any kind of duplication of work effort. So we felt that could be undertaken immediately. When it comes to policy implementation around things like Section 37, that's something that we would want to make sure that council's on board with.
Okay. The province, I guess it's the new growth plan, has requested that we report the funds specifically to them that relates to Section 37. Do you know why do we have to do that? Why are we now obligated to provide that specific funding or separate that funding from the overall cash in lieu or DC revenues?
Through the chair, I actually haven't spoken with my colleagues up at the province about what they're intending to do with that reporting. I would speculate that it's probably for them to gain a better understanding about what kind of density voluntary contributions are being asked for by the industry, and if there's other ways to look at funding those things or what the demands might be. So I haven't actually spoken with them about their goals in that reporting.
And do you know from finance how labor intensive that is going to be, separating that? Probably already separated.
Through the chair, I can't fathom that it would be much of a work effort, as we would be going through the process with the developer and coming up with a program. I think reporting on that would be very straightforward.
Is there any way we can try and implement something so that the province can never come and take that money? Don't answer that. And then finally, I kind of wanted a better understanding of that minimum sustainability score. But is that something that you're looking into and reporting on?
So through the chair, you might recall a number of years ago, the sustainability guidelines were endorsed by council. Mm-hmm. We're now recommending that we bring forward and report on those. We looked for a bronze threshold. We're now suggesting that that would be the minimum, and we would report to council as applications come in. That threshold is not that difficult to achieve, but I think setting the tone out there with the industry and making sure that we do report to council about the sustainability of our new developments is a really good step forward as we're building this new diverse community.
And that, once that's built, then you'll be bringing that forward to council to...
Well, through the chair, the guidelines in fact were already created a number of years ago.
Yes.
They've been voluntary in nature, but now we want to report to council on them.
Okay, perfect. That was all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, somebody like to move receipt? Councilor Bowman, all in favor? That carries. Item 7.5, are there any questions on 7.5? Councilor Williams? Okay. All in favor? That carries. Item 7.6, any questions on 7.6? Councillor Willens, you still on there? Councillor Pashi?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I can't find my questions. I'll go back on after Councillor Bowman.
Councillor Bowman?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, with the city-initiated official plan amendments, as part of the overview, it says a comprehensive review of the city's secondary plans is required to ensure their conformity with the 2006 official plan and provincial policy. Are we also looking at the changes and the amendments we're making in regards to the 2040 vision to ensure that all of them line up? Because I would hate to do this now and then come back in 4 years and say, according to the 2040 vision that council endorsed, we have to make these changes to the official plans again.
So through the chair, the short answer to that is no. This is an exercise to bring conformity and some regularity around our existing policy. As the 2040 vision shapes our official plan policy, we're going to bring forward a new official plan itself, and that would cause us to look at the secondary plans as well. That's a number of years out before the secondary plans would be brought into conformity with that, though.
Okay, and follow-up question, sorry, Rob, is, are we also looking at incorporating under these, the new 2006 guidelines, before we make any other changes, what we talked about earlier in the day with the terms of affordable housing and the matrix that we just discussed?
Through the chair, anything we bring forward in terms of guidelines or checklists or requirements, that could be done through an isolated official plan policy in itself. Wouldn't really have to find its way into this exercise.
Okay, so we're covering our bases by doing this.
This is bringing everything into some greater clarity and consistency today, because there has been some confusion about policies that aren't necessarily aligned with each other, and it's we'll get rid of that problem.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pashi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On March 5th, there was a public meeting on this, but we didn't have anybody attend. Is that correct? It says it in there. It must be correct, but can somebody elaborate on that?
I can confirm that when an official plan amendment is undertaken, you have to hold a statutory public meeting, and that did occur.
I know it occurred, but
Yep.
but nobody came.
There was nobody from the public in attendance. That's correct.
So where was it? And this is across Brampton, so I'm assuming it was held here at City Hall.
Through the chair, that's correct.
And I'm assuming that we got this out to all residents in Brampton. We sent out a notice.
Through the chair, notice would have been provided through the newspaper.
There's a lot of changes to the previous plans with relate to the new plans, and I've just looked at the Snowgrove Heart Lake secondary plan. There's a lot of land use changes in here from the 2006 plan to this plan now. So I'm going to ask that that we refer this back to staff, and staff go back to each ward and hold a specific public meeting in that ward. This is, that's a big undertaking, but there's a lot of changes in here that I can see, that I've seen. With nobody coming to a public meeting with the amount of changes that are here, I think we need to redo this. We just talked about, communications and trying to bring information to the public, but an article in the newspaper to come to City Hall on a March 5th, that's, I think we need to be very ward specific and go to each ward. And
Staff want to respond?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. The actual amendments were not intended to make any changes to existing land uses. So I'm not really sure if maybe there's a mistake or an error in some of the land uses, but it's not really intended to change any existing land use permissions. It's a housekeeping exercise.
And I got that, and it says it in here, many times, but there are changes on the maps that have been provided compared to the old maps. So I guess that's what that I'm a little bit confused.
Were those changes already made in subsequent reports, and so that's why this is just housekeeping?
Sorry, through the chair. Again, this was really a housekeeping amendment that could have captured previously approved land use changes. The intention here was to bring consistency amongst language, but not to introduce new land use designations.
Okay, so then I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll hold my referral back to staff. I still think we need a more of a public engagement, but that's just based on what I've seen compared to 2006 to now. And I'll set up a meeting and maybe sit down, go through some of what I've seen, and then if staff and I can discuss that, and then if I need to hold the referral, I'll move that on Wednesday. Wednesday the minutes come before council, or the following week? It'll be this Wednesday?
So maybe, especially if we refer this straight to council, the staff might be able to answer that question by that time. Because it's not just about your area, it's about all the areas, so.
Absolutely.
We all need to know. And if it's just, of all these, sorry to jump in, but if all these things have already been changed in subsequent reports, then it is just housekeeping. So we've already made those decisions, and that's what we need confirmed.
I just know one that is definitely not, so, and a couple other ones, I'm not sure if it has been changed in reports, and then that is just housekeeping. But I understand for the most part, the rest of the report talks with those housekeeping items.
The motion is referred straight to council for decision, okay? Councillor Miles?
When was our last official plan completed? Anyone?
Through the chair, the official plan is actually dated 2006. It was implemented in multiple stages. 2012 was the adoption date.
Say that again, 2012 was?
The adoption date.
Oh, okay. So it started in 2006, but it took us 6 years to complete?
Through the chair, we now feel it's prudent with the planning vision to undertake a complete official plan amendment undertaking.
Sorry, you're confusing me.
So
it's easy, I know, but
through the chair, we have an official plan dated 2006. That's when the undertaking of the plan. There's various appeals. It's a little bit of a challenge to say on this date, but it's out of date, suffice it to say. So we are going to undertake a review of the official plan in its entirety.
Okay, so this is the actual last official plan that the city completed.
Through the chair, these relate to the secondary plans that form part of that official plan. It's a two-tiered document.
Well, I'm wondering why we're just bringing up our secondary plans to a 2006 official plan, because I remember other official plans that we've done since then, but
So through the chair,
No?
a number of our policies date even back to the 70s. So the whole purpose of the undertaking was to bring some consistency and avoid any confusion amongst those policies where different languages are used and things like that. But the idea is not to change the land use designations. It's just to bring greater clarity through the official plan exercise.
Okay, so let me ask you a question then, just like a specific one, because I really don't understand this. I understand part of it. But so when we're looking at areas like Bramley Road and Steeles, and we've got a holding pattern there, and we're looking at land use planning and et cetera, in those areas because of the GO train and Canadian Tire, et cetera. Does the secondary plan, because this wouldn't be included in the secondary plan amendments that you're bringing in?
Just through the chair, just for clarity, we've made a number of decisions, including interim control bylaws, some other changes. That's not the intent of this, to capture that.
Okay.
This is about a housekeeping adjustment to make sure that there's no inconsistencies with policy language or lack of of clarity. And then, once we go through an official plan review, which we'll undertake in the coming year, then we would also update the secondary plans in accordance with whatever the new OP says.
So if you had a property owner that was looking at doing something on their property, and they're partway through a process, and they're looking at the official plan and the secondary plan for the area, they shouldn't find, because of this amendment, they shouldn't find a lot of change in what the uses were based on what we're doing here today.
Through the chair, that's correct. The intention is not to change people's underlying permissions.
Okay, I'll support it then.
Okay, so the motion is to move this straight through, refer this straight through to council for staff to have an opportunity to clarify the changes in it. Okay, all in favor? That carries. Okay, the next one is the minutes to Brampton Heritage Board. Councillor Williams, you want to move that? Any questions, comments? Seeing Councillor Miles, do you want from the old one?
Pardon me? No, that was from me.
Yeah, okay. All in favor of the minutes? Carries. Councillor Spovieri, you added 9.1, which is driveway widening.
Chairman, I'd like to, this driveway widening problem has been going on for 15, 20 years here in Brampton, and it's not getting any better. I was contacted by a constituent a couple of weeks ago that he received a notice from the city. What used to be Ward 10 now is in Ward 8, actually. But I know the gentleman very well. And he got a notice to comply to that his driveway is too wide, and he was asked to, it's a concrete driveway, and he was asked to cut. And this has been happening over and over and over since the last 15, 20 years that I'm aware of, where this problem has been existing. And so I have a letter from him here that I'd like to submit to staff for a report back. And I'd like to propose that we have to find a better way to inform the residents, new and old, that there is a bylaw in the city of Brampton. And I'd like to propose that we include something in the tax bill that everybody gets. So no one can, this fellow, unfortunately, he hired a contractor. He said he would think that the contractor would be knowledgeable of the city's bylaw. Unfortunately, the guy did the job. Now he's got to cut the driveway. Now, so what this guy's done now, he's going around the whole neighborhood, and he's taken down all the driveways that are that don't meet the bylaw, and he's sending them into the city to say, you know, you're forcing me to cut my driveway. Now you go after these other people, and this has happened before. It's not the first time that this has happened. So it's a huge problem. So I like to put a motion that staff look at, somehow we have to inform the residents that we have this bylaw. Just putting it on the website, or you know, it's not working. So I'd like to propose the idea of actually putting something in the tax bill. The city, we do put something in the tax bill that makes certain announcements or information, and to inform the people once the best way possible that there is a bylaw that do not touch the driveway until you get a permit from the city, and then we try to prevent these problems from happening. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hand this in for the staff, to refer this to staff, and the motion is that staff look at, bring back a report on how to best inform the residents of Brampton about the driveway widening bylaw, and my idea is to put in a notice in the tax bill so everybody gets one.
Can I clarify what you're trying to do here? Because you mentioned just the tax bill, but now you just said best informed. Can we leave it to how we can best inform?
Sure, that's
I can
fine.
tell you from my perspective, I'd never see it because my bank pays my taxes for the mortgage, so I would never see that notice.
Yeah, well, then anyway,
So maybe just the best and how the best.
Sure, you appreciate that, Councillor Spurrier.
Sure.
It's best informed, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Maybe there's some
Okay,
better
that's the
ways.
motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody understand that motion? Do we need it written up?
I have it.
Do it, okay. We'll let the just talk over it. Councillor Fortini?
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate you speaking to the motion. I mentioned this many times in the past. Asked staff to look at new markets. Richmond Hill, to get everyone to get, when you do a driveway, to get a permit. We got a lot of contractors out there that pay Toronto and other cities to work in our cities, and here we don't have that. So when they do a widening of driveway, they have to get a permit for $50 in a new market and Richmond Hill, and the contractor is responsible. We've been saying this for 2 years, but you know, a lot of the residents are not educated on it. The contractor takes his money. Now, if it's an interlocking, it's easy to move a line, but me and John's gone to places where there's beautiful stamped concrete or washed stone, and you wrecked up the whole guy's driveway, cut 6 inches off. And it's the same problem. And at our committee adjustment, 90% of committee adjustment offer wide-width driveways. We're wasting so much tax dollars on staff time, but nobody's ever gone out and said, let's charge a permit and get the contractors there. And a lot of the contractors, you know, they're saying, Mrs. Brampton is the only one that we do not go around driving around. We don't have to pay a permit. So our bylaws, when they see a vehicle working, they should punch it in, check and see if they actually pay the fee at the city, and go after that. They don't do it. So, you know, that's the motion we need. Going on the tax, our Chair Grant Gibson's absolutely right. Half of the tax bill, people don't even see it because it goes through directly to the bank. So,
Okay. Councillor Dillon? On point of order, maybe? Point of order?
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I know, Councilor Fortini, did you say we don't issue permits for driveway widening?
you issue permit for, can I clarify that? We issue permit for, you don't need a widened driveway permit unless you're cutting the curb.
Just need a curb cut.
A curb cut. Well, so we have, I think, 34 feet is 18 feet, 50 feet is 24 feet, 60 feet and older, you're a maximum of 30 feet, but you have to be so much away from the intersection, you need a curb cut. But the contractor, you don't need a permit for that. Other cities are charging permits, and it's not for the $50, it's for to educate the people. So now you say, hey, you came to the permit, you were told what to do.
Can I just get staff to clarify then on that?
Sure. Can staff clarify?
I don't know if we have.
Through Mr. Chair, my understanding is that zoning compliance is required solely in order for each of the residents to complete the work. They have to obviously ensure that the driveway width ultimate does comply with the zoning bylaw width itself. I'm not aware of any additional permit requirements that apply to those types of works over and beyond that.
Harry?
Okay.
So, Chair, we will, both Newmarket and Richmond Hill, we'll take a look at that. So when we're best informed, we'll look at possible ways as well, if that's okay.
Okay.
So do I still have the floor there?
No, you give it up to Councillor Dillon, actually. Councillor Dillon?
I support the motion, but since we're talking about driveways, can we also...
Don't talk about windrows.
Other common issues are, for example, basements, and you don't get permits for that as well. And why not add in a situation where one...
Councillor Dillon, the item that we added on, we'd have to add that, is a driveway widening.
So simply driveway.
You'd
Oh, I'm
have-
just saying,
you'd have to open the agenda to add more
could
on.
there be other areas to inform residents, or would it strictly be driveways? If we're going to send one notice out, maybe there's 2 or 3 others that perhaps we could educate them as well, because speaking on driveways, but just on a different matter, we had a person who was calling in on 50 or 60 illegal basements he wanted to be reported. So can there be the common issues, or is it strictly, I don't know, I'm asking you, Councillor Spoveri, is it just strictly driveways, or could there be something
We
better?
have to stick to what we added to the agenda or open up the agenda to.
I'm just asking if there's other areas we could look into adding into this correspondence, or this letter that we're sending to residents.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to amend and say that staff also look look at ways of informing people about basement apartments.
Okay,
Or
I'm gonna ask, before we go further, I'm gonna ask the clerk on this, because we added an item for driveway widenings, and now we're expanding it. So, Madam Clerk, what do we need to do here?
I would suggest that in this circumstance, if staff wishes to accept, when they're reviewing how best to inform, to include other areas that may be sympathetic to driveway widenings, to include that in their report. But in this respect, we have added an item specific to driveway widenings. We have had other agendas with other items with regard to basement apartments that I think in this circumstance we would be best served to stick to the one item unless you reopen the agenda.
We can reopen the agenda and start talking about other things, but I can think of 5 or 6 more things that we could.
So the reason.
I'm gonna rule that we have to stick to driveway widenings for now.
Right.
That's what we open the agenda.
So the reason why I mentioned those, and speaking to driveway widenings, if we're gonna be, the reason why I mentioned it was that if we're gonna be sending this information out on one subject, why not just add a couple of more that are pressing issues in the city as well? So how do we can't discuss it now. Can we at least ask staff to bring information back on those other?
No, you have to reopen the agenda now to add those other things.
You got it? Okay, so you got something you're gonna bring up? So my one question is, speaking of driveway widenings, and I'll let you continue that on. I have a question about the drainage for driveway widenings per se. Are those, the 2 feet, is that like provincially mandated that we have to have that drainage there, 12 inches on each side, or is that something that the city?
Through Mr. Chair, so what I can comment on really solely right now is that I'm understanding beyond the driveway itself, we do require that there be additional what's called pervious surface area. So being that beside the driveway, you have an area that's whether it's soil or grass where water can penetrate through and be absorbed into the ground so that it does not flow onto a neighbor's property. And so that requirement is typically a 0.6 meter area. And so, yes, 2 feet. And that's a standard requirement that our engineering staff have. I don't know if that's entrenched into any particular policy and such, but I can say that it is a standard requirement by our engineering staff that we do always look to achieve on sites.
Thank you.
Councilor Fortini?
Thank you, through the chair. I just want to clarify, it's not about the widening driveway here, and you pretty hit it on the head. It's about the 2 feet on the side that people don't know. Because when you have a 60-foot lot, you're allowed 30 feet. You can put 12 cars in there. They're not complaining about it. It's the people that are going almost to the borderline. Say, well, my fence is there, so I'm going to go to there. And they don't got the drainage. The drainage is everywhere. It's not just in Brampton. Everybody has a 2 foot, a 0.6 setback off the property line. But what I don't get is when you come near the fence, going on the back, it's right to the borderline. So how is the water from the back coming to the front if it's right on the borderline going in the back? And we have the 2 foot setback only 4 feet away from the house, because that's where our bylaw states. You're allowed 4 feet from the house, and then you got to step it back 2 feet, which is 0.6. So you're still blocking the water in the back. So that's where the problem, I think, we're looking at a lot of driveways where I went. People all have to cut because they didn't leave the setback from the side. It's not the widening. Widening 30 feet is more than enough for 24 feet.
Can we try to stick to the motion, because we have a motion in front of us now. We can talk about driveway widenings all day, I guess.
Yeah.
But
So that's where I think the issue is people don't understand where the contract comes. Says, well, pour it there right up to the property line, and then we end up with these problems. Because most of the driveways are 24 feet or 30 feet. They're fine with that. It's a property, the setbacks. That's where we need the permit. So I seen you, Mark, when you go in there, they actually give you a sketch and you have to sign on it. So now you're responsible. There's no excuse or anything of going to the committee or all.
So if I might, through you, Mr. Chairman, with council's direction through the staff to provide information back on really the best way forward as it relates to driveways. And this one item that Councillor Fortini references is directly associated with the widths of driveways as well. So the staff can do just that and respond back.
Thank you.
Councillor Blashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This really, I don't know if we certainly have the comparable staff here but I don't think we have anybody in Public Works that we can really, this is a bigger issue we should be talking about, and I think that a referral to council on Wednesday and maybe an addition or opening up the scope to include some of Councillor Gibson's, Councillor Dillon's comments. I think that's what we need here. We really need Public Works and bylaw here as well to have a fulsome discussion on this. This is a small portion of a greater thing here. The bigger picture is, and we talked about it many times today, is how do we get that knowledge, that education out to the public. So I think this needs to, I think we need to talk about this at council. So I don't know if I need to refer it because it'll be in the minutes. Yeah. But I think it should be drawn out there and maybe in addition to include some other portions of the scope and what they're doing in Newmarket.
Okay, there's no more speakers, so I don't know, are you referring it or just?
It's the same thing, right?
You're asking, right now, what's in front of me is you're asking staff to report back on how we can make people more aware of the availability of widening driveways.
And they're not going to be able to report back in 2 days. So I think this discussion needs to be referred to council, and we need to have a good conversation about this with staff from communications, from Public Works.
Well, then it's probably better to refer it back to committee in a future committee meeting.
Do
you really want to have, honestly, do you really want to have this conversation at a council meeting? Because I'm going to add 5 or 6 other things to it, because I agree with, sorry, I'm next on the board. I agree with what Councilor Paul is trying to do. I have 5 or 6 other things that I'd love to be a send out too.
Me too. Yeah.
So let's not have this debate at a council meeting, because we'll be there all day. Everybody's going to pick 1 or 2 things to put on.
So then let's refer it to Community Services or Public Works.
I think we should just stick to what Councilor Proveri just tried to do and leave it at that for now.
But their staff aren't coming back to you in 2 days.
No.
In a day and a half to report on this.
Okay, anyway, we have a motion in front of us, and that is, what is the motion?
Because this isn't where the conversation should be had.
To inform the residents of Brampton with respect to the bylaw.
Okay. And it doesn't say anything about the next council meeting, so, okay? Councilor Fortini?
Yeah, just for last time. And I understand, Councilor Commission, I agree with you. I've been asking this for over a year. How many times we've asked about the widened driveway, and they're gonna get back to us, and I don't see anything, and people have to go cut their driveway, have to spend $15,000-$20,000. That's very unfair if they're on
And now we're giving direction. The difference is the direction was never given before. Councilor Willens?
Call the question on what's on the board.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion moved by Councilor Proveri that's on the board? 1, 2, that carries. Okay, thank you. Next item, I believe, is Councilor question period? All right. Councilor question period. Any questions by the council members? Seeing none on the board, public question period. Anybody in the public have any questions on anything on this agenda? Seeing nobody from the public, no closed session, we'll move adjournment. Councilor Willens, all in favor? We're adjourned.